Have you ever wondered why doing more, even when it drains you, feels strangely heroic, as if exhaustion itself has become a badge of honor? We live in a world that worships productivity, not just values it, but worships it. The modern human doesn't simply complete tasks, they offer them up as sacrifices to an invisible deity demanding constant motion. And somewhere inside this endless cycle of checking boxes, meeting deadlines, and staying efficient, a subtle shift took place. Busyness stopped being a condition and turned into an identity. Today, if you're not busy, people assume you're falling behind. If you pause for a moment, you're warned that the world is moving without you. And if you dare to rest, you feel guilty, as though stillness itself has become a crime. But how did we get here? How did productivity transform from a helpful tool into a spiritual doctrine meant to define our worth? This speaks directly to those who feel mentally crowded, overstimulated, and quietly ashamed of slowing down. People who constantly sense they should do more, even when they know they are burning out. To understand this modern obsession, we have to trace productivity back to its earliest forms, to a time when it wasn't a cult, but simply a means of survival. What if the frantic pace of today started with the simplest human desire, the need to survive another day? Long before productivity apps, calendars, or time trackers, workers worked because survival required it. Hunting, farming, and shaping shelter weren't philosophies, they were necessities. There were no routines for high performance, no motivational speeches, no mentors preaching hustle. Work was clear and simple: do what keeps you alive. Ancient civilizations valued effort, but they didn't worship it. Philosophers like Aristotle spoke about leisure as an essential part of life, believing contemplation held its own form of wisdom. Many early societies even viewed excessive work as a sign of misfortune, not success. But everything began shifting during the Industrial Revolution. Machines demanded constant movement. Workers became extensions of the gears and belts. Time became measurable, trackable, and eventually monetizable. And from that era came an idea that now rules our lives. Your worth is measured by how much you produce. This resonates with anyone who feels their value shrinking or expanding based on their output, as though life itself has turned into a scoreboard. Yet the real transformation didn't unfold until technology entered the stage, reshaping not just how we work, but how we see ourselves. Do you feel like the more technology promises to free you, the more chained you become? We were told that innovation would give us time, ease, and rest. Instead, it created the illusion that we should always be doing something. Phones blur the boundaries between being on the clock and off it. Messages demand instant answers. Expectations travel everywhere we go. Social media glorifies routines of waking up at 4 in the morning, running miles, building businesses, writing books, meditating, cooking elaborate meals, and still posting captions like "no excuses." We've turned work into content, exhaustion into aesthetic, and discipline into performance. In this environment, stillness becomes suspicious. Rest looks like weakness. Productivity no longer becomes about action, it's about identity. People don't just say they're working hard, they say they're grinders, hustlers, built differently. It's not productivity, it's branding. This section resonates with those who feel pressured to perform success online, even when their real life is collapsing silently under fatigue. But there's a deeper layer to confront, one that reveals we're not only victims of this system, but active participants in it. What if the chains holding us in place aren't put there by society, but forged by our own fear of inadequacy? The cult of productivity thrives because it weaponizes insecurity and comparison. We fear being seen as lazy. We fear missing opportunities. We fear disappointing others. We fear failing to reach our imagined potential. So we overload our calendars, say yes when we want to say no, and treat rest as a luxury instead of a human necessity. We confuse burnout with purpose. We confuse pressure with progress, and in the process, we become a society of tired minds pretending we are thriving. In the past, slavery meant someone else owned your time. Today, the chains are invisible, and worst of all, self-regulated. People willingly enslave themselves to busyness, believing it earns dignity and belonging. What we call discipline often hides fear. What we call hustle often hides insecurity. And what we call productivity often hides emptiness. This validates those who feel trapped inside expectations they didn't choose, helping them question the beliefs quietly driving their lives. And yet, even with all this weight, there is a way out, and it begins by seeing productivity not as a master, but as a servant. What if the most revolutionary thing you can do in a productivity-obsessed world is simply stop? Escaping the cult of productivity doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means redefining it. It means shifting from busyness to intentionality, from constant motion to meaningful direction. Real productivity isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters. And sometimes what matters most is rest, reflection, moments quiet enough to hear your own thoughts again, thoughts drowned beneath the noise of constant striving. You are not a machine. You do not exist solely to produce. Your worth is not measured in output. But to break free from this modern slavery, we must understand how systems, cultures, and expectations transformed productivity into a god, and why so many willingly kneel before it.
Have you ever noticed how one of the first questions people ask is, "So what do you do?" As if your job title is the truest expression of who you are. Somewhere in the evolution of society, work stopped being an activity and transformed into a marker of identity. We no longer ask who a person is, we ask what they produce. Your job becomes your personality, your output becomes your value, and your busyness becomes your credibility. This wasn't always the case. For much of human history, identity came from community, values, or craft, not from the speed at which a person completed tasks. Yet today, busyness is treated like proof of importance. People brag about being booked, slammed, swamped, or burning the candle at both ends. Overwhelm isn't embarrassing anymore, it's admirable. This lands deeply with those who feel pressured to justify their existence through schedules and hustle. But to understand how this shift happened, we must revisit the moment when the machine truly took control, the birth of industrial society. What if the modern obsession with constant busyness began the moment humans learned to measure time with unforgiving precision? When factories replaced farms, the value of human life started being calculated through output per hour. The clock, once a simple tool, turned into a tyrant. Workers no longer moved at their own rhythm, they became extensions of machines. Their time became measurable, trackable, and monetizable. The Industrial Revolution didn't just invent new technologies, it invented a new worldview. Time equals money, rest equals waste, and people equal resources. Suddenly, idleness became suspicious, stillness looked unproductive, free time once cherished became something to minimize. Managers hovered with stopwatches, analyzing every movement to optimize speed. Every second mattered, every gesture could be improved. It planted the seeds for the guilt many people still feel when they pause. This explains why so many instinctively feel ashamed for taking breaks, because society has trained them for generations to treat rest as a flaw. Yet this was only the beginning. As industry evolved, a new force emerged, reshaping not only how we worked, but who we believed we had to be. Why does it feel like no matter how hard you work, there's always someone expecting you to push harder? Modern capitalism transformed workers into something more than employees. It crafted the perfect, always available soldier. The workplace expanded beyond offices and factory walls. Emails follow you home. Tasks linger into the weekend. Notifications buzz at midnight. Work is no longer a location, it is a state of mind. You aren't just performing tasks, you're performing availability. Companies encourage words like ownership, hunger, passion, and drive. They reward skipped vacations, late-night responses, and sacrificed rest. Passion becomes the prettiest disguise for exploitation, turning exhaustion into loyalty. This resonates with anyone who feels trapped inside a job demanding everything while labeling the sacrifice as opportunity. But even this wasn't enough to fully shape the modern worker. The culture surrounding us had to evolve into something even more forceful. When did sleeping less, sacrificing more, and doing everything become signs of strength instead of warning signs of collapse? Hustle culture took root and glorified struggle, not overcoming it, but performing it. It made exhaustion glamorous and constant striving noble. Messages like sleep is for the weak, outwork everyone, and no days off became mantras. There's no space for balance or nuance. You must always hustle, always grind, always want more. If you're not pushing yourself towards burnout, you're viewed as someone who isn't trying hard enough. People feel guilty not when they fail, but when they rest. This is how a culture turns into a cult, when people willingly sacrifice themselves at its altar. It confronts those who feel pressured to keep up with a world that celebrates self-destruction disguised as ambition. But to complete its takeover, the cult needed one final ingredient, a tool powerful enough to shape human behavior everywhere. What if your phone isn't a tool but a leash cleverly disguised as convenience? Technology didn't just amplify productivity culture, it automated it. Algorithms decide what you see, when you see it, and how much attention you give. Your device becomes a portable workstation, a stress generator, and a constant reminder to keep producing. Notifications keep you engaged, streaks keep you disciplined, social feeds keep you comparing. Even rest becomes performative, even peace must be posted. You're encouraged to optimize every moment, even your breaks. The result is a world where silence feels uncomfortable, boredom feels dangerous, and rest feels like falling behind. Technology evolved into the silent priest of the productivity religion, whispering non-stop that you should be doing more. This speaks to those who feel enslaved by their devices, yet unable to disconnect because the world now expects constant accessibility. And with this final piece in place, we begin to see the full picture, a world where busyness is engineered, normalized, and rewarded. But to truly grasp why this system is so destructive and why escaping it feels impossible, we must examine the emotional toll it takes. The cost not measured in hours or tasks, but in identity, peace, and the quiet parts of ourselves we often forget we're losing.
Do you ever go to sleep feeling like you didn't do enough, even on the days when you did everything you possibly could? One of the most damaging effects of productivity culture is the belief that enough doesn't exist. No matter how much you accomplish, there's always more to chase. More goals, more habits, more routines, more milestones you're supposedly falling behind on. You can finish a full day of work, handle every message, meet every responsibility, and still feel like you failed. That's because this culture doesn't measure what you did, it measures what you didn't do. It keeps you mentally hungry, permanently unsatisfied, endlessly chasing a finish line that moves every time you get close. That anxiety becomes a constant companion, whispering that you're behind, that you should be doing more, that you're not living up to your potential. This lands deeply for anyone who self-judges, who feels guilty for resting, who believes they must justify each hour. But anxiety is only the beginning. When the pressure becomes constant, the mind slides into something far more dangerous, a level of exhaustion that no simple rest day can fix. What if burnout isn't just being tired, but the emotional collapse that happens when your inner world can't keep up with your schedule? Burnout is misunderstood as mere exhaustion, but it is so much heavier. Real burnout is when the connection between your effort and your sense of meaning begins to dissolve. When every task feels overwhelming, when joy disappears, when rest no longer restores you. Burnout is the mental equivalent of running a machine long after the wires have melted. And what causes it isn't only overwork, it's the over-identification with work. When your worth depends on your productivity, you can never slow down. You push even when you're depleted. You grind even when you're breaking. You don't rest, you collapse. You don't pause, you shut down. Productivity culture insists this is normal, that hustle is honorable, that burnout is some kind of rite of passage. But burnout isn't a badge, it's a warning signal that something inside you is being worn away. This resonates with anyone who feels emotionally numb or drained, yet unsure why. And burnout leads to something even more painful, a quiet crisis of identity. If tomorrow you stopped being productive, who would you be? This question terrifies people because so many have tied their entire identity to their usefulness. Without goals, tasks, or achievements, many feel lost, empty, or uncertain. That is the ultimate psychological cost of productivity culture. You stop being a person and become a role, a function, a tool. People define themselves by labels like accountant, entrepreneur, student, performer, labels that say nothing about who they truly are. These aren't identities, they're job descriptions. When work becomes your whole life, your inner world shrinks, your imagination weakens, your emotional depth flattens. The self becomes a shadow behind the schedule. And when the schedule collapses through job loss, illness, or burnout, people often experience an existential void, an unsettling sense of not knowing who they are without productivity guiding them. This speaks directly to those who fear slowing down because they've never met the version of themselves that exists outside of busyness. But losing identity isn't the only wound. Productivity culture steals something even more fundamental: your ability to be present. Why is it so difficult to enjoy a moment without immediately thinking about the next one? In a world obsessed with productivity, moments become opportunities. Everything must be optimized, tracked, justified. Even rest becomes a performance. People no longer take walks, they get their steps in. They no longer read for pleasure, they invest in knowledge. They no longer relax, they recharge for better output later. This obsession kills mindfulness. Presence is replaced with planning. Peace is replaced with metrics. You might be physically in a moment, yet mentally trapped in the next task. Your mind becomes a browser with 100 tabs open, none of them fully loading. This resonates with those who feel mentally scattered, overstimulated, and unable to slow their thoughts even when they crave calm. But beneath all this mental noise lies the deepest wound of all, a quiet loneliness that grows when life becomes a checklist. What if busyness isn't a sign of success, but a shield you use to escape yourself? So many people stay busy to escape their emotions, unmet needs, unresolved fears, or unspoken pain. Busyness becomes a hiding place, noise becomes comfort, movement becomes protection. When your days are packed with activity but empty of connection, loneliness grows silently. You're surrounded by people, yet disconnected from yourself. You achieve everything, yet feel nothing. You move constantly, yet go nowhere inside. This emotional loneliness is the true cost of living as a productivity machine. Because productivity can give you success, but it cannot give you meaning. This resonates with anyone who feels a quiet emptiness despite having full calendars and relentless activity. And now, having seen the emotional cost so clearly, we can finally turn to the deeper forces that keep society pushing you toward this exhaustion, generation after generation. What if your exhaustion wasn't a personal failure, but a business model? Entire economies thrive on the time, energy, and attention you give away without noticing. Companies don't simply sell products, they harvest your focus, your stamina, and the hours of your life. Productivity culture trains you to hand these over willingly. Long work hours increase corporate output. Constant availability boosts profitability. Burnout creates dependency on convenience. A tired worker spends more on shortcuts, food delivery, time-saving apps, self-help, wellness products meant to soothe the stress that shouldn't exist in the first place. Your exhaustion fuels industries built on keeping you overwhelmed. The system doesn't want you well-rested, it wants you functional enough to produce and tired enough to consume. This speaks to those who feel drained and used, helping them see their fatigue not as a flaw, but a consequence of a system engineered around their depletion. Yet economics is only the first layer. There's also a cultural system that reinforces the same message: you are what you produce. Why does society admire the person who works 80 hours a week more than the person who chooses balance and peace? Modern culture glorifies achievement, not growth, not wisdom, not humanity, but accomplishment. Social validation now comes through output, degrees, promotions, side hustles, followers, milestones. People aren't celebrated for being thoughtful or kind, they're celebrated for staying busy. Busyness has become a marker of status, a symbol of worthiness. Schedules fill up not because people want them full, but because everyone else's are too. This creates a cycle of competitive busyness where individuals push themselves harder, not out of desire, but out of fear, the fear of looking like the one who isn't doing enough. Ambition becomes performance. Overcommitment becomes identity. This resonates with anyone who feels judged for wanting a simpler life, reminding them that society's standards are not rooted in truth, but distortion. And beyond cultural pressure lies something even more pervasive, the digital world, where attention itself is currency. Have you ever wondered why your phone feels impossible to put down even when you're exhausted? Your attention is worth billions. Social platforms are not designed to connect you, they're engineered to capture you. Each notification delivers a dopamine hit, each like keeps you engaged, each scroll feeds a system that monetizes your time. And what does constant consumption create? Mental clutter, constant comparison, and pressure to keep up with people who seem endlessly productive. Even your free time becomes labor, posting, responding, scrolling, reacting. Your leisure becomes another form of work. Rest turns into content. Peace becomes something to perform. Nothing is allowed to simply exist. Everything must be shared, validated, consumed. This resonates with anyone who feels mentally drained by the digital world, yet unable to disconnect because platforms have turned rest into another form of productivity. But beyond algorithms and economics lies the deepest layer of all, the psychological mechanisms that keep people afraid to stop moving. What if the reason you can't slow down is because the system taught you to fear stillness? Productivity culture weaponizes fear. Fear of falling behind, fear of failure, fear of irrelevance, fear of disappointing others. These fears keep you obedient. They keep you chasing goals you never consciously chose. The system whispers that if you stop, someone else will pass you, that if you rest, you'll lose your edge, that if you slow down, you'll be forgotten. Ironically, none of these fears reflect reality. There is no race, there is no scoreboard, there is no finish line. Yet, as long as you believe there is, you stay busy, stay grinding, stay trapped. This resonates with those who struggle under the weight of comparison, helping them recognize fear as a tool used to keep them small. But the system doesn't only operate externally. Its most powerful mechanism is the version of it that forms inside your own mind. What if the world doesn't have to pressure you anymore because the system has already installed itself within you? Eventually, productivity culture becomes self-sustaining. Even without deadlines or external demands, you feel compelled to stay busy. You become your own taskmaster, your own critic, your own enforcer. You stack habits, track progress, optimize routines, and monitor your efficiency. You treat yourself like a machine and expect machine-like output. And when you inevitably fall short of impossible standards, you blame yourself instead of recognizing the system that conditioned you. The cult doesn't need guards or punishments, it simply needs you to police your own rest. This resonates with those who feel guilty whenever they slow down, reminding them that the pressure they feel was never theirs to begin with. And now that the architecture of this system is visible, the economic pressures, the cultural expectations, the digital traps, and the psychological conditioning, we can finally move towards the last, most important part of the journey, learning how to break free.
What if true productivity isn't about doing more, but about doing what matters? Breaking free from the cult of busyness begins with redefining productivity itself. Productivity is not the enemy. It's the worship of productivity that enslaves us. Real productivity has nothing to do with how many hours you grind, how many goals you stack, or how many tasks you check off. Meaningful productivity is anchored in intention. It asks you to question whether your actions are moving you toward the life you genuinely want or toward the life you've been taught to want. Every day, people waste enormous time being productive on tasks that don't matter, chasing achievements that hold no meaning, filling schedules with obligations instead of choices. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking how to do more and start asking why you're doing it at all.
This resonates with those who feel stuck on autopilot, people working hard but not consciously, people craving a shift toward a life that truly reflects them. But redefining productivity is only the beginning. To reclaim your life, you must also reclaim the resource productivity culture stole first: your time. When was the last time you said no without feeling guilty? Most people don't have a time problem, they have a boundary problem. Your time is constantly hijacked by expectations, interruptions, and obligations that do not serve your life. Every yes to something meaningless becomes a no to something important. Reclaiming your time requires setting boundaries without apology and protecting your energy without guilt. It means choosing your commitments with intention. Productivity culture hides a crucial truth: you cannot do everything, and you are not meant to. Life isn't about maximizing every moment, it's about investing your moments wisely. Protecting your time is not selfish, it is essential for your mental health and your growth. This resonates with those who struggle with people-pleasing, overcommitting, or feeling obligated to meet everyone's expectations. But even if you reclaim your time, you are not free until something deeper shifts: the way you speak to yourself. What if the harshest taskmaster in your life isn't your boss, but the voice inside your own mind? You can quit a job, delete your social media, or step away from obligations, but if your internal dialogue still calls you lazy for resting, you are not free. Most people carry an inner critic shaped by childhood expectations, academic pressure, cultural standards, and corporate values. That inner voice repeats messages like, "You should be doing more," "You're wasting time," "You're not enough." True freedom requires rewiring that voice. It means replacing judgment with curiosity, pressure with compassion, and shame with understanding. Instead of saying, "I didn't work enough today," try asking, "What did my mind and body actually need today?" Instead of thinking, "I'm behind," try acknowledging, "I'm moving at the pace that's right for me." Your inner dialogue must evolve from a drill sergeant into a guide, from punishment into partnership. This resonates deeply with anyone who carries guilt and internal pressure, reminding them that self-compassion is not optional, it is essential. After healing the inner voice, the next step in breaking free is reclaiming something even more profound: the power of stillness. When was the last time you allowed yourself to do absolutely nothing without trying to justify it? Stillness has become rare, almost forbidden, yet it is in stillness that clarity emerges, creativity awakens, and identity forms. Doing nothing is not laziness, it is a return to the state of being instead of constantly doing. Try sitting quietly for a few minutes. No music, no scrolling, no planning, just breathing, just existing. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your mind panics. It demands stimulation. It begs for movement. It wants to return to the familiar cage of busyness. But with time, stillness becomes empowering. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You begin to feel your own emotions again. You begin to reconnect with desires buried beneath noise and expectation. This resonates with those who crave peace but feel threatened by quiet, helping them view stillness as a necessary reset rather than a waste of time. Stillness helps you reconnect with yourself, but true freedom requires reconnecting with life itself. What if your life could feel spacious, meaningful, and self-directed instead of rushed, pressured, and externally defined? Breaking free does not mean rejecting ambition or withdrawing from society. It means intentionally designing a life aligned with your values instead of the system's demands. Ask yourself what you want your life to feel like, not what you must achieve to impress others. A meaningful life is built through intentional choices, healthy boundaries, rest without guilt, work aligned with purpose, and a pace that honors your humanity. When your outer life reflects your inner truth, productivity becomes a tool, not an identity. Work becomes a part of your life, not the entirety of it. Success becomes personal, not performative, and in that shift, the cult of productivity loses its power. You are no longer shaped by its expectations. You become the author of your own pace, your own purpose, your own existence. This resonates with anyone who longs to reclaim their life from noise and pressure, allowing them to imagine a future that belongs to them. You are not a machine. You are not a schedule. You are not your output. You are a human being meant to think, feel, rest, connect, and exist far beyond the demands of a society obsessed with productivity. Breaking free isn't a single dramatic decision, it's 1,000 small acts of reclaiming yourself. The cult of productivity loses its power the moment you choose to live intentionally, compassionately, and awake to your own humanity.